Hey, it's time for Thoughts on Thursday, where I share what's been on my mind and you share what you think about it in the comment section below. Please like, comment, subscribe, click the notification bell to be alerted when I post videos, and remember, sharing is caring. So today I'll be discussing Lecture 5 from the Great Courses Plus, not a sponsor. And so it's The Rise of Communism from Marx to Lenin, and today's lecture is called Marxism After Marx, and it's taught by Dr. Vayas Gabriel Lulevicius from the University of Tennessee. So in the last lecture, we ended with Marx's death in 1883 and Engels becoming the sole authority on Marxism. In this lecture, Dr. Vayas discussed what happened to Marx's movement after his death, starting first with the founding of mass political parties, the most impressive and advanced being the Social Democratic Party of Germany, or the SPD. Second, we'll discuss the establishment of a new international organization which sought to unite the individual mass parties. The Second International, which was to succeed the First International that Marx created with Engels, and those names are stupid. I don't know what else I could come up with, something a little cooler. And then third, we'll talk about the fighting and internal debate over the issue of whether reform or radical revolution was the real goal of the movement, a debate called the struggle over revisionism. Germany and German socialists were a big part of all these aspects, as Marx would have assumed, since he saw his homeland as a likely place for historical transformations. In closing, we'll see how the movement affected things globally, like in the US, where there was an event called the Haymarket Affair in 1886. Polish philosopher Leszek Kolakowski describes this whole period of the Second International from 1889 to 1914 as the golden age of Marxism in his Main Currents of Marxism. There would be a lot of discussions, shouting debates, and rivalries during this time due to there being enough doctrines on Marxism to recognize a school of thought, but not rigid orthodoxy where there wasn't room for debate. Remember that the Paris Commune had formed a mythology that became an inspiration or something to be feared. Middle-class people and elites that were concerned thought there was a correlation between the Communist Manifesto and the Paris Commune, which we discussed was incorrect. Something then called the social question was fear people had about possible class conflict. There was a song created by a guy that was inspired by the Paris Commune that became the anthem of the international socialism, called the Internationale. These names, anyways. It was written in 1871 during the Paris Commune uprising by Eugene Potier, who had been a member. Combined with music by Pierre de Gaite, it became really popular. Not like WAP level popular, but so popular it was translated from German to many other languages. So here's the lyrics. Stand up, damned of the earth, you who are still forced to hunger. Army of slaves awake. Endure no longer being nothing in order to become everything rushed together. Peoples, hear the signal. Arise to the final fight. The International will win the human right. We will be saved by no higher being, no god, no emperor or tribune. To be released from our misery, only we can save ourselves. This world must be ours. People, hear the signal. So it sounds kind of like a death metal song. So confrontations in the streets and cities would be accompanied by this song. I think I actually heard it during an Antifa riot. This would eventually become the anthem of the Soviet Union. Apparently, this would become a part of a long-lasting copyright feud as well. Same thing goes for lawsuits regarding who owns copyrights of Marx's English translation of his works as it pertains to the internet. Strange, because I thought socialism and Marxism was against individual ownership. So around the same time as the writing of the Internationale, there was another important thing taking place. It would later be called by historians the Second Industrial Revolution. It's dated to 1870 when the Franco-Prussian War took place. The war would unite Germany and be a victory for them over their enemy, France. The Second Industrial Revolution was led by Germany, as Britain had led the First Revolution. The second one was based on new advanced technologies, the production of steel, chemicals, electricity, and the combustion engine. There was a 260% increase in production in Europe from this period up until the First World War. During this time, the class system changed, but not as Marx had thought. We all know that he was not a psychic. It was a more complex system and had some good outcomes. Marx thought that the concentration of capital would compel the pauperization and immiseration. I cannot say that word every time I've read over it. Immiserization of a growing proletariat and shrinking of the factory workers, but instead there was an addition of office workers, white-collar technical experts, and a growing middle class. Also, there was room for reform within the capitalist societies and improvements of living conditions. As an example of this was in Britain, or there was an example of this in Britain where they implemented the Factories Act of 1847, or the 10 Hours Act, where women and teens were only allowed to work 10-hour days in textile factories. From that came the British Reform Act of 1867, which, quote, enfranchised men of the working class, end quote. Britons of all classes were proud of their ability for compromise and reform, quote, even if it meant muddling through, end quote. Authoritarians even took on some reform as a way to purposefully, quote, defuse revolutionary grievances, end quote. After Germany became a united empire in 1871, Chancellor Otto von Bismarck, quote, sought to win workers to the imperial cause in the 1880s, end quote, introducing social legislation such as the sickness insurance law, accident insurance, and old age pensions. Dr. Vea says this strange fact needs to be noted, that the first welfare state was created by a German conservative. This wasn't a coincidence. This was Bismarck reacting to the huge growth of Marxist socialism in Germany. In the 1860s, there were socialist parties established throughout Europe nationally. This sort of backed up what Marx and Engels said in their manifesto that the working man had no country. But, quote, full resolution of this tension was left for the future, end quote. Trade unions were also established on a national basis, and socialists cooperated with them. But there were tensions between unions and socialist parties. Quote, unions and trade organizations sought improvement now for their members, while socialist leaders kept their vision on the long-term goal of revolutionary transformation. These parties tended to have more women getting involved than in other areas of politics. There was a belief that women's struggles with work and raising children would be resolved with revolution, so they were thought as secondary, or quote, secondary to the class struggle, end quote. With Engels' approval, these groups came together and formed the Second International, or the Socialist International, established in 1889, which was very symbolic that when it was established because it was the 100-year anniversary of the start of the French Revolution. These national parties in the Second International were, quote, committed to meeting together in periodic Congress and avowing solidarity across borders, end quote. There were many different national parties, but the focus in this lecture was on the most impressive one, which was the German Social Democratic Party, or the SPD. The German Social Democratic Party was founded in 1875 and was a fusion of two other parties, Ferdinand Lassalle's General German Workers' Association and the Social Workers' Party of Germany, founded by August Bebel and Wilhelm Liebknecht. Like the rapid process of the Second Industrial Revolution in Germany, the SPD grew quickly and gained a foothold in parliament. As industrialization advanced, so did support for the SPD, which horrified conservatives like the Reich Chancellor Bismarck. He saw a correlation with the Paris Commune and the SPD and said, quote, I recognized the social democratic elements as an enemy against which state and society are obliged to defend themselves, end quote. Bismarck ended up outlawing the activities of the SPD in the anti-socialist law after anarchists tried to assassinate the Kaiser twice in 1878. But they continued to operate in secret until its candidates could stand for parliament as independents, and the party continued to grow quickly and their movement strengthened. The SPD actually became a subculture. There were socialist reading groups, singing clubs, hiking clubs, sports associations, newspapers, kindergartens, schools, and libraries, and were supported by socialist workers and their families as, quote, in a sense, a foreshadowing of a harmonious worker society, end quote. Makes me think of SJWs, and I wonder if they have a singing group. It's so stupid. The anti-socialist laws were allowed to go away after Bismarck resigned. The socialists saw that they had the power and they had won. The main ideologue of the SPD, Karl Kautsky, gained confidence from this result. As the British historian A.J.P. Taylor said, quote, Kautsky, the high priest of Marxism, postulated in The Way to Power that the secret of success lay in doing nothing. The SPD was the largest party in Germany in terms of votes in the federal election of 1912. It had a total vote of 4.5 million and 110 deputies in parliament. Women were 16% of the party members. Germany's free trade unions had 2.5 million members. A socialist Germany seemed to be inevitable. But the SPD was committed to the coming revolution. But at the same time, the level they were invested in society and government almost made them in the realm of status quo, which was something they were against. Dr. Weiss said historians called this, quote, negative integration. They were in opposition, but paradoxically still integrated, involved, and invested, end quote. There were different movements in other countries that were distinct, but looked to the SPD as the ultimate model. In Austria-Hungary, Austro-Marxists, quote, felt they needed to wrestle with nationalism and ethnic identity, which Marx had said were fading, end quote. Little did Marx know what 2020 would bring. The Austro-Marxists practiced thought experiments, quote, producing new models of federalism and autonomy as a way of engaging ethnic identity, end quote. Nationalism and ethnicity would be a challenge that wouldn't go away in the later history of communism. The Austria-Hungary socialists projected a formidable example of mass power as demonstrated in the streets. In Vienna in 1908, a, quote, down-and-out man witnessed these demonstrations, and that man was Adolf Hitler. He would later write in Mein Kampf, I pondered with anxious concern on the masses of those no longer belonging to their people and saw them swelling to the proportions of a menacing army. For nearly 2 hours I stood there watching with bated breath that gigantic human dragon slowly winding by, end quote. So like a Chinese dragon festival. Oh, but that's human-controlled dragons, not human dragons, and now I'm thinking of the human centipede. So Hitler rejected the Socialist Democrats, but their mass politics had a profound effect on him. So the Polish had a unique experience in regard to socialism. Their former country of Poland had been divided up by the surrounding powers in the late 18th century. Poles were ruled by Russia, Germany, and Austria. The Poles had underground socialist parties that were fragmented and split up often. First, there was the Proletariat Party in 1882, then the Polish Socialist Party, then the Polish Social Democratic Party, then SDKPIL, which was a more radical party and stood for Social Democracy of the Kingdom of Poland and Lithuania. These names suck, you guys. Okay. In France, non-Marxist socialist ideas were still appealing, and anarchist ideas and utopian socialism, along with practical trade organizationing. In Italy, the Socialist Party was founded in 1892. Quote, the revolutionary wing of the party after 1912 was led by socialist Benito Mussolini. In regard to socialism, Britain was an exception. Marx may have called Britain home when he was exiled there, and he died there and was buried there, but his ideologies didn't really catch on with the Brits. The British socialism was influenced by Fabianism. Quote, the Fabian Society was founded in 1884 and emphasized gradualism, the methodical preparation of social reform and coordination, and waiting not to revolt. The Labour Party, founded in 1900, was influenced by Fabianism. Now, in America, there wasn't a mass socialist movement. There was a movement that took place in Chicago. On May 4th, a group of anarchists, including many Germans, had led a protest on Haymarket Square in downtown. The police tried to end it, but someone threw a bomb. The cops shot up the crowd, and shortly after, 7 police and 4 civilians were dead. Why does this sound familiar, guys? A group of anarchists were charged with conspiracy and 4 hanged. This was called the First Red Scare in America from 1886 to 1887. Is anyone surprised that this happened in Chicago, though? Because that state, I think, has been cursed for a very long time. Anarchists and socialists were seen as one and the same by Americans and viewed as, quote, foreign, exotic, and dangerous, discredited, un-American, end quote. There is still some uncertainty in this next detail. The workers' holiday in most of the world is on May 1st, but in the US, Labor Day is celebrated on the first Monday in September. The reason, after the Haymarket incident, the Second International made May 1st a holiday to commemorate the Haymarket protest. American leaders made Labor Day a public holiday to separate that from the violence that took place in Chicago. So why did socialism not become a huge thing in the US as it did in Europe? Because it was waiting for 2020. No. Although there were socialists in the US, they never were great enough to form a third political party. Quote, some scholars have argued that greater class mobility and the capitalist spirit of American workers forestalled it. Sombar said it was the high living standard, as he explained in a very vivid image. On rafts of beef and apple pie, socialist utopias of every description go down to the destruction in the United States, end quote. The Haymarket incident was off-putting enough to discourage more of that in the United States until 2020, apparently. So back in Europe, the Second International had issues figuring out how to follow Marx's writings still, and argued about stuff a lot, as usual. There was this concept of revisionism, and there's this guy, and I don't remember really who he was, and I don't care, but his name was Edward Bernstein. He agreed with revisionism. He was exiled to England, where he met Engels, who became his mentor, but he also saw British Fabian socialists approach, and he ended up disagreeing with some of Marx's ideas and took to the slower reform through parliament idea. To him, the movement was everything, not the final goal. His comrades were very shocked by this. He was very committed to socialism as the final goal, but thought it would work itself to this conclusion through practice. He thought the answer was in constant reform and not violent overthrow. He was a reformist, not a revolutionary. He said, quote, I set myself against the notion that we have to expect shortly a collapse of the bourgeoisie economy, and that social democracy should be induced by the prospect of such an imminent, great social catastrophe to adapt its tactics to that assumption. The theory that the Communist Manifesto sets forth of the evolution of modern society was correct as far as it characterized the general tendencies of that evolution, but it was mistaken in several special deductions. Above all, in the estimate of time the evolution would take. But it is evident that if social revolution takes a much greater period of time than was assumed, it must also take upon itself forms and lead to forms that were not foreseen and could not be foreseen then. I don't know what it is about these old school guys and their writing. There's so many run-on sentences, and I don't even know what I just read. So, yeah. Anyways, the SPD would condemn revisionism, even if they sort of practiced it themselves, but the majority of the Second International voted against revisionism. Now, there was a split between the radicals and the reformists that would grow until the First World War, quote, dramatically exploded the socialist movement, end quote. And that wraps up lecture 5. 7 more to go, guys. I swear, it's so hard to get through these some days. So 7 more to go. We're going into Russia next week. And, you know, the Russian movement of Marxism. So now it's time for communism and socialism in the news. Okay, but first I wanted to say real quick, I am not a journalist. I am discussing the history. I'm discussing the history of Marxism and communism and finding articles that remind me of Marxism, communism, or socialism and talking about them. I'm not covering every angle of every article, and I'm not doing extensive research or doing counter arguments. I'm just sharing my thoughts on the articles that I find interesting. And I have encouraged you and will encourage you again to please do your own research, guys. Don't take the news at face value. Don't just follow mainstream media blindly. Don't follow random weird articles on Facebook. Don't just use Twitter as a way to gain information. Use those things because they're all pieces of a puzzle that you can put together and figure stuff out for yourself. But know that there's just a lot of misinformation and a lot of leading information and a lot of wording. The wording is driving me crazy in some of these articles, guys. And I'm reading 1984 right now, and there is this department that changes words, and it's like called, I think, Newspeak. They are changing words, and the words mean different things, and that is what's happening here, guys. Or they're using words to manipulate, and it's really messed up. But I digress. Pay attention. Listen to mainstream media. Listen to independent journalism. Again, do your own research. I mean, if you really want to know what's going on and really have a good perspective, unfortunately, you can't be lazy right now. So that's what I'm going to say. And I'm going to remind you again, I'm not a journalist. I'm not here to provide all angles for you. You got to find out yourself. So there are many great people out there covering stuff, independent journalists. And I will say again, Tim Pool, you guys. He's great. Please follow him. And yeah, you'll hear some good stuff. And again, he's great. But today, communism, socialism in the news is going to be a little different. I don't have an article to read. I actually have a flyer to talk about that's being placed on people's cars, allegedly, in at least, or at least 2 colleges that I have heard of. So let me explain how I found out about this flyer, and then I'll talk about why it is so concerning. So last week, a family member of mine sent a screenshot of a Black Lives Matter flyer that was supposedly placed on a college student's car. This family member learned about it from a comment on a post at this college's the certain college's Facebook page. Her her son goes to the school, and but this wasn't her son that posted this information. It was somebody else on this thread that she happened to be reading. So the college had posted an article about, being so proud of raising the Black Lives Matter flag on campus, and people were commenting how great it was. Well, then this person ended up posting a picture of this flyer that was found there and was stating their disapproval with the fact that the school was supporting or siding with, quote, that would side with a Marxist ideology, and an ideology that wants to harm police and white people, end quote. So this person went on to comment that the college would probably lose a ton of funding because of this, and then said, this happened to be found on the car at your campus, and posted the picture of the Black Lives Matter flyer, and did say that the person who told them about this flyer wanted to be kept anonymous. Apparently, this person, my source that I'm telling you about, apparently they've gotten death threats and been doxxed due to speaking out about their beliefs, and there was a lot of hate directed toward this person on this Facebook thread. But the post with the flyer was actually quickly deleted, quickly deleted by either the college's Facebook admin or by Facebook itself. I'm not really sure, but my family member had taken the screenshot and sent it to me before they took it down, but she sent a link and it already was taken down, so it was pretty quick that they jumped on taking that information away. But luckily, of course, because the screenshot was given to me, it had the name of the person who had posted, so I went and did a private message to this person, and I explained, who I was, and that I was doing this Thoughts on Thursday thing, and going over Marxism, communism, and things in the news that remind me of it today. So I wanted to know if the article was legit, the flyer was legit, because I wanted to talk about it, as I'm talking about it now. So the person messaged back pretty quickly, actually, and said that it was legit, but again, said that the person who told them about it wanted to remain anonymous. And they said that, so the person that found the flyer didn't actually see flyers on other people's cars nearby. They kind of looked, but some cars are far away, and they didn't want to walk up to other cars and worry that the car's owner would be approaching while they were looking and thinking they were the ones putting the flyer on the cars. So my source actually went to George Fox University and had said that there was a flyer found there by a friend and shown to him, and that was about 3 months ago. And then now this flyer popped up at my family member's kids' college that this person, was told about as well, and they live up there and they've been in that area for a while and is very familiar with this college. And this person also mentioned that they believe that Black Lives Matter are targeting liberal arts colleges and religious colleges right now. So I understand that I don't have real proof, obviously, as other than the screenshot of this flyer to prove that, it's legit. There's no camera footage of somebody putting this on cars. We don't know who it was, why, whatever. But I'll tell you why I'm not so concerned about that. But let's go over the flyer, let's look at it, and then I'll discuss my concerns. So it says, "Attention white men, women, and children, you are the enemy. We will not stop until there are more white homicides than black. We will not stop until all white people are sent to re-education camps. We will not stop until white people pay extra taxes to support black individuals. We will not stop until black power runs all government. We will not allow any white person to date another race." So they're going to kill my husband? Are they going to kill my mom? They're going to make us all divorce? What? Okay, and we support no white-owned businesses. Hate is okay if it's directed at white families. So that was the flyer. Anyone see that this is problematic at all? No? Now again, there's no proof as to who put this on these cars, or why, or if. All I know is I've seen this picture of a flyer. Anybody can print up a flyer and put a fist with Black Lives Matter on it. Anybody can do that, right? It's not hard. Maybe it was some kids playing a joke. I thought it was pretty funny to put that on people's cars in 2 different states. Again, because one of the colleges is in Washington and the other one is in Oregon, and they're not close to each other at all. So, but I don't know. Maybe some kids are playing jokes and they think it's funny. And, but maybe not. Maybe it's some crazy, extreme right wing person wanting to build resentment and hate towards Black people or Black Lives Matter, and are using this to try to make people angry and get people riled up against this movement. Or maybe it's someone who supports Black Lives Matter but is not actually part of the organization or doing this. The organization hasn't told them to do this. Or maybe it's actually Black Lives Matter. But we don't know. Yeah, if someone does know, please let me know in the comment section. If anyone has seen this flyer, if they've seen it, in a window or on a sign in a yard, which apparently that's a thing people are doing now, putting signs in yards, or on your car or wherever. If this is something that's more common than these 2 colleges that I have heard of, please let me know. I would like to know that. But that is the flyer, and whether or not it's being put out there, whatever, or who's doing it or why, is really not my concern. I'm concerned with the fact that there is a flyer, and that flyer is touting such hateful things to begin with. So this is really dangerous right now, guys, because there are people on edge. We're kind of approaching a civil war. We're kind of in a cold civil war right now. I know it sounds all crazy and scary, but I kind of really feel that way, and I think if you think about it too, you may agree. So again, a lot of people on edge, a lot of people angry, a lot of hate out there. There's also a lot of mentally unstable people who are latching on to some of these things and going a little nuts as well with it. And whether you're black, white, orange, green, I don't care. It doesn't matter. If someone is on the edge and they happen to be seeing something like this on their car, it could, make them see it, and maybe they are a BLM supporter. And they're like, you know what, I see this flyer and I'm going to go harass and hurt a bunch of white people and kill them, or do what this flyer says, yell them about stuff. I don't know. Or a different person sees it and they don't like BLM, and they decide that this pisses them off, and now they're so mad they want to go out there and kill a bunch of black people, or target BLM, protests or whatever, and incite violence and harassment. So do you see the danger in something like this? Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if it was BLM. It does fit kind of the description of things that we've been seeing for a while. And they haven't denounced any of the violence or killings that have gone on in the name of their movement, and some of the horrible things that come out of the mouths of people that are holding Black Lives Matter signs or yelling at cops and other people and counter protesters or whatever. Again, I'm not saying that there isn't 2 sides. I'm not saying that there isn't a far right side as well being crazy. All these people, I don't like any of it. It's just not productive. And again, I just don't like seeing all the hate out there, as most of you probably feel the same as I do. So anyways, what was I saying? So, we do know, again, for some of the things about Black Lives Matter that maybe would fit with this ideology that's on this paper, we do know that the leaders are trained Marxists. Some of them have claimed to be trained Marxists. And we know from what we just read, what I just read to you and learned about, is that, the majority of Marxists were really big on radical revolution and violent revolution. So that supports that ideology, I suppose. And then if you look at Chop Chaz, there was actually a woman named Jaden Grayson who seemed to be one of the special or in charge of operations of that. And I found out about her through a video that I will provide in the link, that has an interview of her, and she is telling the reporter that she's, that they are going to get, in Seattle, they're going to get their demands by any means necessary. And she says that a few times I can't remember exactly what the reporter says, basically is like, do you mean violence? And she just says, by any means necessary. I'm making you all aware of that. So it was pretty obvious to me that, it was something saying that any means necessary, violence, whatever. And obviously we know people got killed there. So, and then also Sean King, who was a BLM activist as well, and kind of up there in the ranks. He was in support of tearing down statues, and also wanted to tear down religious statues and to break church windows. And he said what Jesus represented white supremacy or oppression or something. So, there's a lot of angry and violent things. I'm not saying there isn't anger and violence on the other side, guys. I'm just talking specifically about this flyer And since we have no information on any proof or whatever, just kind of looking at it, and to me, I say, yeah, I feel that this could be something that BLM would tout and would put. So it wouldn't surprise me just from, I mean, we saw that poor couple that was sitting there and the people drank their drink and yelling, I mean, just the disruptive and the hate that's being spewed. So honestly, it doesn't surprise me if that is. And now I will say too, that not all Black Lives Matter supporters or activists are extremists or into violence. I know that. And I think, I believe in Black Lives Matter. I believe that Black Lives Matter. I don't believe in the organization. I don't support the organization Black Lives Matter. And I feel like it was so smart of them to use that, because when people say I don't like Black Lives Matter, it makes it sound like you're saying that you don't like Black lives don't matter to you. No, Black lives do matter. I think that's pretty obvious. It's been obvious my entire life. I think there's a small majority that maybe don't feel that way, but the most of us are pretty cool and think that Black lives matter. So it's kind of a funny play on words when you're saying that you're against something as far as an organization, but it makes it sound like you're also against Black people. So that's not what I'm saying here. So yeah, but again, I will say that it doesn't necessarily matter who made this flyer or why they made this flyer, but that this ideology is out there. This ideology is out there enough that people are perceiving it, or it's real, or whatever, whoever wrote this, that this is out there to be put on a piece of paper, because that is what people think that these people think. Does that make sense? And that's scary. It's scary because, like I said, it could incite more violence and more negativity and more hate and more anger. And this kind of stuff is not good. Yeah. So, what do you guys think? I think another quick thing that I'll say is that I'm really big, because some people may say, well, but Black Lives Matter has been a good thing because it's shined a light on some problems we have in our society with, maybe some stuff that needs to happen with the police and blah, blah, blah. I get that. And I think that those things need to, yeah, of course, be brought out there because I think the majority of us want justice and rights for everybody and people being treated equally, right? So, of course, if there are some things that are happening in our society that need fixing, then we need to fix them. But this isn't, to me, I don't believe that it's like pandemic levels. Anyways, I can't believe I just used that analogy. But so to me, the way that I judge things is by the fruits, and that's the very biblical thing. It's like you'll know a man by the fruits that he produces, or a tree is good. But anyways, I can't remember the exact scripture, but basically whatever you do in your life or what you see other people doing, what are the fruits of it? Is it good fruit? Is it bad fruit? Is it fresh? Is it rotten? And in my view, I have seen more destruction, violence, hate, anger, death, like over 30 people being killed under the name of this movement now. More of that is being produced. That is the kind of fruit that I'm seeing, to say that a lot of it is rotten compared to the maybe few pieces of good fruit that have brought attention to issues in the Black community and police reform. So that's just my view on that. But again, it's the fact that this is out there, that this is an ideology, that this is something that people are thinking about, even if they're joking, even if it's a far right person trying to make people mad. They think that if is BLM or BLM supporter, they think these things in their heads, and it's scary and it's horrible. It's just horrible. But the violence is okay towards white people, or hate is okay, or whatever. It's yeah, it's not okay, and it's very concerning. But what do you guys think? Does this upset you too? Is it meh? Do you not care? Let me know in the comment section. And then again, I'll put a link of the Colored Conservatives channel. That's where I found this interview with Jaden Grayson. And it's interesting because they're talking about how they believe that there's some evidence that Jenny Durkin, the mayor of Seattle, was associated with the Chop Chaz takeover and sort of with them secretly. I don't know. Could be nothing, but it was an interesting video to watch. So you can look at that. But that's all I have for today. Remember, guys, these thoughts are my own. We may not agree, but I still love you.